Let's look at part 3 of the speaking test for the IELTS now. So, as you might remember, what happens in part 3 is that the examiner will ask you questions and answers about a topic. And the topic is related to the part 2 topic, but it is more of a general sense. So, for example, if your part 2 was talking about a school that you went to, then part 3 will probably be about education. If part 2 was about a movie that you saw, then part 3 is probably going to be about entertainment and being famous. So let's just look at the kind of questions that you can expect. One thing that should be remembered here, though, is that part 3 is less scripted than part 1 or part 2. The examiner does have some guidelines about the kind of things he or she can ask, but the examiner also has freedom to use their own questions. So this makes the part 3 a bit more unpredictable and a bit more challenging. However, there are some things that we can look at and that we can expect during part 3. And here they are. So the first one is making comparisons. The second one is giving opinions. And the third one is speculation. So what I want to do in this video is go through these 3 areas in detail to show you a little bit about what kind of questions you can expect. And I'll also talk about some of the other follow-up questions that might come up. Let's begin with comparisons then. So here are some examples of the kind of questions you might get for part 3. Is public transportation better now than it was in the past? And this is something that's quite common in part 3, to compare a situation now with the same condition but in the past. The next one, what subject is more important, maths or history? Do men and women play the same kinds of sports? So you can see these are typical comparison type comparison type questions. Of course, you need to make the comparison first. So if we talk about transportation, you might say something like this: today's MRT is much more extensive than before. Today's MRT is a little more comfortable to use than other types of transportation, that kind of thing. Of course, it's not enough just to make the comparison. You need to follow up and you need to say why. For example, if you say that the MRT is much more comfortable now than in the past, then you need to go into more details and describe exactly what is more comfortable now. So that's comparisons. Now let's look at opinions. And of course, with opinions, you're going to be presented with opinion. So the examiner might ask you something like this: some people think that air travel is very dangerous to the environment. Do you agree? Some people think that money can buy happiness. Do you agree? Some people think that advertisers tell lies about their products. Do you agree? So, of course, in terms of your opinion, basically, you're going to agree or disagree. But one of the little tips here is to think about how strongly you agree or disagree on that issue. So let's just look at some different kind of ways of giving opinions. And you can see that some of them are strong, some of them are weak. So you've got strong agreement or disagreement. I completely agree, I totally agree, I absolutely agree. Or the same thing with strong disagreement. I completely disagree, I totally agree, I absolutely disagree. Then you've got a slightly more gentle agreement or disagreement with I mainly agree, I mainly disagree. And as it goes down, you can have weaker agreements or disagreements. So at the bottom we have, I think this is generally largely true, or I think this is generally or largely untrue. And of course, what you need to do, it's not enough just to give your opinion, whether it is strong or weak or conditional opinion, but then of course you need to go in and you need to provide your reasons and give some support as to why you have that opinion. And when you do that, you need to perhaps think of examples, think of some news stories that may apply, think of things that you can say that explain your opinion in more detail. I should say here that really there is no right or wrong answer. The examiner generally doesn't care too much about whether you agree or disagree. What the examiner is listening for is exactly how you support and how you explain your opinion. So obviously, if your opinion is a difficult one to explain or support, then it's going to be more difficult in the test. However, if you give an opinion that is easy to explain why you agree or disagree, then it's going to be easy for you to talk about. So basically, your opinion is your opinion, but try and choose easy opinions rather than difficult opinions. Let's look at the final area that comes up in part 3, and this is speculation. Now, if we talk about speculation, what I mean is talking about the future. So here are some of the example questions that you might get. Will public transportation become more popular in the future? In the next 10 years, will people become more or less happier? And will the eating habits of people change? So talking about the future, either you're going to say, yes, it will happen, or no, it won't happen. However, there is some flexibility here, because depending on your certainty, we don't know about the future, but you can have a strong certainty where you're saying it will completely or definitely happen. You can have a medium certainty about the future, so you're saying it could happen. Public transportation could become more popular, yes. Or the eating habits of people might change. Or you could have a weak certainty about the future, where you have, well, perhaps the eating habits of people will change, but I'm not sure. There is a faint possibility that people will become happier in the future, but I really don't know. So it's a good idea with speculation to express how certain you are about that future event. And of course, this is closely linked to your opinions. Another point about speculation is to use your imagination. Of course, we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. We can only make a guess based on what we see now and how we imagine the present to change in the future. So go ahead, even if you have some rather sort of science fiction or quite imaginary creative ideas, that's okay. You can talk about those in this part 3. So they are the 3 main areas you can expect in part 3. Now, it's not limited to those 3 areas. They are just some common things here. And of course, the examiner could ask many different kinds of questions, since it is more freer and the examiner is allowed to think of things depending on what you say. However, I also need to just finish this video by talking about follow-up questions, because it is quite common for the examiner to use follow-up questions. These are questions that are based on what you say. So here are some examples. So how do you feel about that? Do other people agree with you? If you're talking about opinions and you give your opinion, then the examiner might follow up with that. Can you give an example? Will it change in the future? Why? Why not? What do you mean when you say? So this is perhaps when something is not clear, the examiner might ask you to clarify. Not perhaps that he doesn't understand, but perhaps that your supporting points do not clearly explain your idea or opinion. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? And finally, what are the advantages and disadvantages of this? Now, of course, these are not the only follow-up questions, but they give you a good example of the kind of things that might come up in part 3 and what you need to be ready for when you are in this stage of the speaking test. So there you go. In this video, I've covered some of the kind of questions that you can expect for part 3, and I hope this has been useful. Thank you.